So if you've been on the fitness journey for a while now, like I have, you've probably seen that most people aren't making that much progress. And if you go to the same gym, you run into the same people year to year, they might lose some weight for the summer, gain some weight over the holidays, but their physiques generally look the same. They aren't able to put on any more muscle after they've gone through the newbie gains phase where they've pretty much gained everything that they have, and they're basically stuck. And I want to make sure you don't get stuck. So in this video, I'm sharing with you 4 early signs that you're not building muscle. And I want you to be able to recognize these signs, look at your program, make the corrections, and start making some good gains. So let's dive into it. Sign number 1, when you're performing your sets, you're hardly ever seeing any rep drop off. And in other words, you're able to hit the same amount of reps on all the sets with the same weight continuously. That's how your training looks like. And what this can indicate is that you're not really taking your first and your second set closer to failure. Because if you were, for example, let's say your maximum with a squat is 225 pounds for 12 reps. No more reps than 12, that's it, that's your real maximum. And let's say you take your first set and you do 11. That's gonna be very, very hard. Your set close to failure, you're gonna need a lot of rest. And then for the second set, sure, maybe you hit 10 or 11, but third set, very unlikely. Fourth set, even less likely, because you've accumulated a certain amount of fatigue from training close to failure. And it's normal for the amount of repetitions you can achieve to decline. And as a beginner, this doesn't necessarily have to happen, because as a beginner, you can still train far from failure, make lots of gains, and newbie gains phase, but that honeymoon period is gonna end. And now when you're transitioning from a beginner level to an intermediate level, then you really have to start challenging yourself, training closer to failure. And you have to start looking at your training program. Am I really close to failure? Or am I leaving 4 or 5 reps in the tank here and I'm able to really hit all these reps on all the sets? So analyze your program right now and see where you're at. And you might benefit from doing a little bit of AMRAP testing, so as many reps as possible in some of the sets, so remove the limits and see how far you can take it. Obviously do this safely, safety bar, squat rack, all that stuff to make sure you're doing it correctly, and then you can see, and then you can recalibrate and start using the right weights, start really challenging yourself and pushing your limits, because that's how you're gonna maximize your gains. Now, the second early sign you're not building muscle is if you're not hitting the like button on this video yet. So if you haven't done so already, please do me a favor, go below the video, hit that like button for some extra gains. And jokes aside, moving on to the second early sign is that your sense of self-worth is linked to how much weight you're lifting. And we've all walked into that gym and we saw that guy benching, half repping 185, stands up very proud of himself, and then months later, years later, he's still doing the 185 half reps and basically looking exactly the same. So he's either gonna get hurt, continue making 0 gains, or he's just gonna quit because he's making 0 gains, instead of dropping the weight down to 135 or 140, whatever is appropriate for his level of strength, where you can do it with full range of motion and start seeing some progress. And the thing with bad lifting habits is that they're subtle. They don't suddenly happen. You might be thinking, well, I'm not the 185 half repping guy, but you could become that guy, because it starts with little cheats. You don't touch the chest. You stop a little bit above and a little bit more, and suddenly you're half repping. You raise a little bit of weight on the squat. You don't go all the way down because it's harder. You stop a little bit higher, a little bit higher, a little bit higher. Suddenly you're at parallel, then you're above parallel, and then, yeah, you're lifting quote unquote impressive weight, but your range of motion is now being sacrificed. And when you look at that weight, your ego starts getting attached to that weight, then that weight is something that you feel like, well, that's my weight. That's what I can do on this lift. But the reality is you can't do it with full range of motion. So you're better off by doing a weight reset, training more safer and getting more gains, than keep doing what you're doing, because you're going to eventually hit a wall where you're not even going to be able to perform, even with lousy form, the amount of weight that you're trying to do. So the key here is not to let those bad lifting habits creep up. Yes, they will eventually, form will degrade as you keep getting up in weight, but it's important to be mindful of this. And then when you notice that there's a degradation of form that's not acceptable, you start doing a weight reset, go back, rebuild, and continuously do so. People that do this, they see some tremendous progress over time because they don't have their ego and their self-worth attached to their weight. And those ego lifters, those that go to the gym and they do nothing less than 225 is acceptable, they're usually stuck for years, making very little gains and usually getting hurt because they're just continuously pushing without training in a smart way. So train smart, pay attention to your form, and you're gonna start seeing some great gains. Now, the third early sign that you're not gonna build as much muscle as you can is if you're ignoring training quality. And let me explain what I mean by this. So there's a lot of discussion out there on how to program training. So which exercises are the best, what's the best training frequency, how many sets and reps and all that important stuff. And you do need to have a great program, but it's also about how you execute that program. How is your level of focus when you're doing the sets and the reps in the gym itself? Do you have the intent to do the best you can for every single one of those sets? Are you in the gym, you're fully present, and you're engaged, and you're really trying to give it your absolute best? Or are you just physically there and mentally somewhere else? Or are you just completely distracted and you're just going through the motions? This matters. This is one of those forgotten things. People are so obsessed with having the best program, but then the execution of that program is spending half the time browsing social media while they're in the gym. And the execution itself matters a lot. And this can be the differentiator between those guys that are really getting some incredible results versus those that are kind of getting mediocre results, but they have great programs. And so you have to look at your own performance and think of this as sort of the art of lifting. While the science of lifting, yes, it's important. We all like to nerd out on the important parts, but when you have the program, make sure you actually execute the program correctly, and you're gonna see some exceptional gains. Early sign number 4, you're continuously jumping back into a calorie deficit. And by doing so, you're breaking momentum with your gaining phase, which is really important for building lean muscle. And typically what's gonna happen is someone is gonna finish their fat loss phase, and then they will want to relax. They think, I've earned it, I worked so hard for it, the worst has passed, now I can finally gain, I can eat a little bit more, I can just enjoy myself. And of course, they slowly start losing self-control, and then in just a matter of a few months, they gain a lot of weight. And most of that is actually fat because they gain it really quickly. And now they look at their physique compared to their old physique, not happy, they want to go back into a cut, which then, of course, limits their muscle growth because they're limiting calories. And most people fail to realize that muscle growth and fat loss operate in 2 different time frames. Muscle growth is a much slower process. We're talking months and years. To gain 10 pounds of muscle, that takes a very long time to do so naturally. And it's a much more systematic process, much more patient process, looking at your body weight, tape measures, training performance, photos, especially from a perspective of someone who's objective, looking at you. Because if you look at yourself day to day, you go to the gym, you come back, look at yourself in the mirror, you look exactly the same. You won't even notice differences. And the worst case scenario here is actually being in what I would call perma-cutting. You're not finishing your fat loss phases, but you're also not getting into gaining phase. You're kind of in between. So you're not committed to either phase. You can maybe do a little bit of fat loss, but then when you go into gaining, you end up binging out of your mind, overeating, and then you have to cut again. So you're kind of in the middle. You're not really making any solid long-term progress. And that's how you can be stuck for years with the same physique. And so if you're in that state right now, really be systematic with this and commit to long-term goals. So don't think about this as week to week or month to month, but really what you're going to do this entire next 12 months. And you will be able to get some serious gains because that's the only way to get out of this situation. Also, what's going to help you is making sure to subscribe below, make sure to enable notifications by hitting the bell icon. Details for coaching are in the description below if you want to work with me as your coach. So check those out as well. And I will see you in my next video.